Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Design Cinema on this wet and rainy Friday afternoon here in Singapore at our studio. And you can probably tell by my voice that I sound pretty tired. It's been a long week, actually been a long month, but I still want to get this stuff recorded. So this will be episode number 5, question and answers. Maybe being tired is good. I will speak a little slower and a little bit more thoughtful perhaps. Because I simply don't have the energy to talk at the 100 miles an hour that I usually do. But before I get started, let's run through some house cleaning. First is thank you guys so much for sending all the questions and positive comments. I'm gonna not read those part of the questions because that's a little repetitive, and I'm sure it doesn't really concern you guys. All the positive things. And I'm also going to consolidate some of these questions into one. So I'm going to paraphrase some of these questions because there are a lot of questions that are very similar to each other. So hopefully we could just cover them all at one go. And also things that I have addressed in the previous episodes. For example, your portfolio, money, rates, and so forth. Then I'll be skipping those questions as well. And one last thing is I'm going to skip the username. I tried to read some of them, but you guys have a lot of crazy usernames, and I'd rather skip them than to pronounce them incorrectly and make you guys angry. So, and anything with Photoshop tips, I'm going to skip those as well. My best advice for that is read the manual that comes with Photoshop, because there's a lot of questions about quick keys and how to hide menus and so forth. That type of stuff is really basic Photoshop questions. So, yeah. All right, let's jump this in. Let me take a sip of tea here and get ready for question number 1. So, do you have any tips for wrapping up a design for 3D modeling? I would love to see a video where you convert a design to a side front versions ready to throw them into the modeling phase. Okay, so what he's talking about here, or he or she is talking about, is orthos. So orthos is part of being a concept artist. You're going to have to do them, especially when you are a junior artist. This is something that make a lot of junior guys do. Ortho is a drawing of a front and a back and a side, sometimes a top and a bottom, depending on what the object you're doing. So yes, you're going to have this skill. I'll see if I could do a video on it. It is pretty time consuming. Ortho is something that once you start getting some experience under your belt, you're not going to be doing much at all, because they are time consuming. Studios are not going to waste too much of your effort to do them. They're going to make the junior guys do it. It's kind of like a rite of passage type of thing. So I'll see if I could do one, or maybe show some examples from past projects, because I've definitely done orthos. They are very boring. They're not fun to do because they're very technical. You have to make them very precise. They're meant for 3D modelers, so you cannot screw them up too badly. By the way, I'm going to try to go through these questions as fast as I can, because there's about 50 or 60 of them. So even if 1 minute per answer, that still is 1 hour. So let's see how many I can get through. If I can, we'll do a part 2. Okay, question number 2. What are the top 10 topics used in concept design for inspiration? Well, there are a lot. In my opinion, one of the, at least from what I like to use, is going to be nature. And that's probably number 1. I use nature's forms, from animals to plants to rock formations and so forth, and alien planets, right? All that stuff is inspired by what's around us in nature. So that'll be a top priority for me. And then ancient cultures will be a big one. I'll follow up by that. So your Egyptians, your Mayans, Romans, Chinese, Japanese, right? Those are great cultures with a lot of interesting designs to pull from, not just in their architectures, but you could look at the costumes, the mythologies. There's so much stuff in ancient cultures that you could freely use. And you see Hollywood and video game companies use that all the time. A lot of historic films come out, and a lot of video games based on the historic stuff and ancient cultures, like Assassin's Creed, for example. So yeah, and followed by that, for me, will be military type things that have a lot of functioning associated with it. And military is definitely almost 100% functional. So I love seeing like vehicle designs and engines and so forth, just to see how these things work. So that's a big attraction for me. Some other ones, not in any particular order, will probably be fashion, books, of course. I think product design in other fields of work, not just in entertainment, but I go to a lot of product blogs that have things like camping and just anything, cars, something for your desk, because you see a lot of ideas, especially nowadays with Kickstarters. You're getting a lot of fresh ideas coming out on the market that otherwise might not ever have a chance to be seen. So that's quite interesting to me. And the rest is whatever you like. There's no rules in this business. That's why it's so fun, is whatever inspires you, whatever you find interesting, go ahead and find out about it. And yeah, Wikipedia these days for pretty much everything. So just read and just absorb as much as you can. All right, next question. Can you please talk about the ways to control camera to get the view and effect you want while remaining accurate? I think one of the easiest ways is use a 3D package. We do that here at the school for our students. Very early on in term 2 or so, we teach them SketchUp, which is a free software you can download from Google. And you can mock up a scene in literally minutes because it's such an easy software to use. And you don't have to model anything. These are just basic geometry mock-up. So that way you can get yourself a camera, move it around, and just find the shot that you want. It saves a lot of time. In traditional ways, this will take a long time to do. Another way to do it is use a perspective grid, a pre-generated one. I have done a demo on that not that long ago. I think the one with the Baldur's Gate spider creature. You can see some grids being used there. But that's pretty slow too. And also grids, since they're pre-generated, you're going to have a lot to go from. So it could take some time to find the right one because you're kind of using a software to cycle through all different versions. But that's what I use. I use grids. I don't use 3D software. I'm a little bit more old school. If you're younger out there, you like to learn new software, then get your hands on some good 3D software to do that, and it saves just a ton of time. All right, next question. Does a rule about how high you place your horizon line apply to vehicle design? This question actually has to do with where do you put a camera, because when you put a camera in a very dynamic spot, for example, the vehicle's facing camera, technically you won't see much of it. You'll only see the front view of it, maybe some of the fins, engines, intakes, but you won't get a good idea what this vehicle actually looks like. So the question was like, what would you do in that case? Well, this kind of stuff comes down to what you're doing the concept art for. If it's for marketing art or a piece of production drawing meant to sell the shot, then dynamic shots are definitely valid because 3D artists are very unlikely to be building off of that drawing. But once that thing has been approved, then you could go into actual production drawing, and that's where you draw your 3/4 view, which is very common, top-down 3/4 view. It's boring, but it is very useful for production. And that might even lead to a ortho that we mentioned just a few minutes ago. So yeah, it just depends on the situation and what you're going to use it for. Okay, next question is, I'll paraphrase it. It's basically asking something I sort of addressed in the job one, which is when you send something into a company, they don't send a reply. This person actually says that he's a very chill person and is starting to get kind of pissed off because studios are, in a way, ignoring him. I totally understand what that means, and if you listen to the previous episode, I addressed this. Basically, it comes down to studios are very, very busy. And from an individual point of view, you are important. And that's true. You send your stuff in, you put all this work in your portfolio, and nobody responds back. Seems rude from your point of view. But from their point of view, you got to imagine for every single job, just even if there's only 10 or 20 people applying and they have 6 or 7 jobs open, you're talking about 70 resumes that could come in maybe in a single week. So there's no way they could reply to everybody. And the other reason is that they don't want to get into conversations with people because some people ask, why did you reject me? You start to open up that can of worms. It could lead to all sorts of problems. Most people would take rejection quite well, but you're going to get that one person who's not going to let it go. They're going to be asking like, what do you mean my work is not good? What do you mean my stuff is not good? I'm better than the rest of your concept guys. Who knows, right? So by leaving it sort of just not answering the email, that actually just shuts everything down. So that conversation never happens. If someone actually writes you, most likely they actually like your work, but they don't have a position open, for example. But very few studios send out personalized rejection letters. You might get something generic, maybe, but I think even studios don't want to do that because that acknowledges the fact that they've seen your work, and that could open up a can of worms into someone inquiring about what's wrong with it. If you want to survive in this business, which is in most business in general, rejection is part of this business. Don't let it piss you off. Just brush it to the side. It is very, very common. Even for professionals, it's common. We could be working on a project and the clients never get back to you. And that's with like years of experience. You have no idea. Right? There's many reasons why someone don't write back to you. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're just not interested. Maybe they're working with someone else. Who knows? And you just chalk it up to part of being the business. And don't let it affect your mood or piss you off or anything like that. All right, so keep sending those portfolios in. Don't give up. Right? Just because someone don't respond to you doesn't mean that you should just give it up. So just keep doing it. All right, next question, which is, I sometimes get a random design that is too far removed from reality, so it doesn't know where to get references from. Well, my answer for that is you should probably design something a little bit more grounded to reality. If you're doing something that doesn't have any references to look for, you are probably doing a design that's way too far out there. That's not going to be a very portfolioable piece. Do that later. When you have a job, when you have a career, you can start experimenting with certain type of visuals, looks, styles. But in the meantime, if you're building a portfolio to get a job, you have to look at what the job is asking for. That's the one where the podcast, maybe episode 2, 3, about finding a job. Listen to that one once more, because studios list exactly what they want from your portfolio. And if you don't do what they ask for, they're not going to hire you. This is a product-making business, not a business in which they're hiring you to do whatever you do. You're doing a job for somebody else. So yeah, if you're practicing, draw things, design things that are industry relevant versus doing your own stuff that are just way out there. It might be cool for you, but do that stuff for fun. You got to separate that out from the job. Okay, next question. Hopefully I'm not going too fast here. How many? We're 10 minutes in. Oh man, we're only 10 questions. No, not bad. 1 minute per question average. Okay, Feng, can you make a list of books you recommend? This is a very personal thing as well, because I'm not sure actually what kind of books he's referring to. Either it's a novel type of book or a reference book for industry. I'm assuming he's talking about books to read in terms of novels. This has to do with the type of subject matter you like. For myself, I love science fiction, I love military, and I love fantasy. A little bit. I don't like all fantasy books, but a little bit. So it depends on your interest. Find anything that you like. Recently, I've been trying to finish up all my Michael Crichton books. He's written a lot of stuff like Jurassic Park and Timeline, Airframe, Andromeda Strain, 13th Warriors. There's a lot of cool books. So, and his writing style is very Hollywood script style. So if you read his books, it's almost like watching a film. Dan Brown also, I think, in my opinion, falls in that category, where a lot of science or pseudoscience is being dropped in, not a lot of knowledge. Not sure if it's true or not, but it's very interesting. It's very Hollywood. So I enjoy those books. And on the military side, I love Tom Clancy. I read almost all the Tom Clancy books at this point because they're very, very good if you're into military. And science fiction book, no doubt, you gotta go read William Gibson, which wrote Neuromancer. That is a must read. And Starship Troopers, I think, is a must read. Eisenhower books such as the Foundation series. In my opinion, these are iconic books that define the entertainment industry and influence dozens and dozens of films and games out there. So get your hands on those. But if you don't like science fiction, don't read them. You don't have to be forced to read anything. Do what you like. There are a lot of classic books, and for myself, if the book is classic, for example, let's say 1984, right? I personally love the book, but some people don't like the book. If you don't like the way a certain author writes, don't read it. For example, I probably shouldn't name stuff just in case. This industry is way too small. There are books out there that are well recognized, but sometimes I just don't like a particular author's way of writing. The grammar, the sentence structure, the way it's set up, just doesn't read comfortable to me. So no matter how famous this book is, I still skip it because I can't get into it. Versus like some books that are maybe a little less known, but the author writes in a very interesting style, or something I particularly like, I'll go ahead and read it. One example would be The Road by McCormick. The Road, which is inspiration for games like Fallout and so forth. Go find this book. He writes in a very, very interesting style. But I love it. I love the way McCormick writes his books. So go look it up, The Road. But no list in particular. Type in top 100 science fiction book, top 100 fantasy books. Just go off the list and pick one because they're probably all very, very good. All right, next question. Is a concept artist design process same as visual development that is working in animation? Yes, that is true. Very similar. Animation studios typically have more job roles for concept artists in terms of job titles. A place like DreamWorks or Disney, they'll break down a typical job into probably 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 different departments because they are after a major product and they hire the best of the best and they make you do the best of what you do. So if you're a line artist, you might be in the visual dev department in which you design and draw, and somebody else might actually paint your drawing. In a smaller studio, you'd be drawing, designing, and painting and doing marketing art. You do all of it. But in a place like Disney or DreamWorks, they'll have 50, 60, maybe hundreds of artists working just in the pre-development stage. And they can afford that because they have a lot of funds. But you don't get that much in smaller studios. So yeah, visual dev is pretty much the same thing as a concept artist. It just depends on where you're working at. Different title, same job. Okay, next question. This question comes up a lot, so I'm going to spend some time talking about this, which is a few things. One is the nothing comes out thing, right? You start to draw and nothing comes out. The other is the procrastination. Like whatever you draw, it doesn't look good, so you want to give up. This showed up about 7 or 8 times just in the previous few episodes. We have these questions. So it seems to be bothering a lot of people who are self-teaching, right? Which is you draw something, you just don't like it at all. It sucks, you give it up. Now you're getting depressed. Trust me, I totally know that feels like, because even professionals, we get the same exact thing. This is a hard business to be in which you have to be constantly designing and coming up with fresh stuff, and you have to make it look good. My advice, if you're younger, First, don't give it up. But you have to be also honest. If you truly don't like doing this, like every time you start drawing, but you can't get into it, there's a little bit of reality check here, which is maybe this is not for you. Drawing looks fun. It looks somewhat easy, I guess, from the outside. But as you guys heard from this podcast, it's a very difficult job to do. So if there's something you just can't get yourself motivated to do, it might not be. Okay, now again, this is not for everybody, but it might not be the job for you. Okay, because you have to find some level of interest, no matter how difficult something is. If you're interested in it, you're gonna want to do it. I remember when I first started getting a pilot's license. In the first few flights, easy, right? Take off, do some instruments, and you land. And then you gotta start doing your navigation. And man, and we have to learn everything without GPS. So you have to do VORs and all these kind of nav charts and calculation of wind speeds and all this airspace. There's a ton of stuff that you kind of have to track in your head because they test you without GPS. And it was so hard. I was just going home going, oh man, the earth is round, and you have to make these magnetic justifications. There's all these things you got to do when you're flying an airplane. And you have to do this manually, tracking it in your head, and not, in the meantime, still fly an airplane. And I thought about giving it up, but the thing is, I just love airplanes too much, as you guys probably know out there. So I stuck with it. And I think, and once you get through it, you start to find the satisfaction of solving it. Because once I knew how to do VOR navigations, I was like, dude, this is awesome. Now I could go to my, instruments only flights and stuff. And it's a huge reward. This business is exactly the same. If you can't get yourself into it at all, like you start picking up a pen and you draw, it just don't like it, well, maybe it's not for you. Now, for those who wants to do it, but find that your stuff doesn't look good, well, the only way to solve that is keep doing it. And you have to block out a lot of time to do this. Don't give yourself 2-3 hours as a hobby and then go do something else. Because I see that a lot from younger kids who are learning this, which is they draw 1 or 2 hours and they go back to playing Skyrim or whatever game that's come, XCOM 2, right? So they're like, okay, I'll draw for 2 hours and my reward is XCOM 2. It should be the opposite, which is like, dude, don't play any games and just draw. That's your reward. Play 1 hour of a game to reward yourself 10 hours of drawing. You gotta get yourself in that mode. And don't worry about the quality. The more you do this, the better it becomes. There is no other way. There's just no way to skip it. And I tell our students all the time, if we knew a way to get you to be really good, really fast, we will definitely be teaching to you, and so will every other school on the planet. But you notice every school teaches the same way, which is fundamentals, and you just do it and you do it and you do it for years and years and years till you get better. So if you're self-teaching, that's the only way as well. You're just gonna hunker down and draw. If you have a mental block, I don't particularly want to say advice like go out for a walk and clear your head and things like that, because actually that is a distraction. I find that if you have a mental block, maybe change the subject matter you're drawing, but keep going forward. Draw something, paint something. You gotta go forward. Get yourself out by doing the actual work versus avoiding it. I find that the things like go out and play some video games or go out and do something, for me, it doesn't work that well. In fact, it makes it worse because I start to think about doing something else that's more fun than finishing my work. Even for professionals, we get onto projects that are very tricky. I mean, I'm on projects that are just very, very brain draining. They're very hard because we're doing IP creation. So it's a lot of thinking and you're just so tired. And you don't want to do it. You just want to go on YouTube and watch dumb videos all day. But you got to just be like, you know what? I got to turn off YouTube and get to work. And an hour into it, you're like, it's not that bad. This is not that bad. It just work. You have to get yourself that mode. Maybe I'll follow up later if this question show up again because I know it's in a list somewhere. But yeah, if you're self-teaching yourself, you have to give yourself that time. Maybe on weekends, on Saturdays, when you wake up, block out the whole afternoon from 2 p.m. to maybe 10 p.m. That's all you're going to do. No phone calls, no text messaging, no Facebook, no video games, and just draw. No matter what comes out of it, who cares? If even the drawing sucks, you're doing this for yourself. Move your pen across the page on paper or Wacom, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to just spend the time and get into that groove of doing it. When I was in school, I spent hundreds of hours doing this kind of stuff. No joke. And our students here do the same thing. It is the only way to get good in this business. There just isn't another way. And mental blocks will come all the time. Frustration will come all the time. So find good music, find good coffee, maybe a cake that you like to eat, something that makes you happy. You're going to need it in this business. It's a very draining career that you have. It's tiring physically, it's tiring mentally, and it's very high pressure because people are always making you do something that doesn't exist. Very, very hard. Sometimes I thought about man, it would be nice to work in some kind of mundane job or some kind of assembly line where you could just kind of shut off your brain, just press button every 3 seconds. Seriously, I wish for that kind of stuff sometimes. But of course, that's not going to give you the lifestyle that you want. If you want to work on video games, have fun, that's not going to give it to you. So every good comes with the bad, and you're going to have to just hunker down and do it. Hopefully that helps you guys. I might get into this as a complete separate podcast, by the way, like take this whole subject and bring it into what a young artist learning on your own should do. Because we get that question. That's probably the other one that we get a lot, which is you're self-teaching yourself and you want to break into this business. How do I do it? It's totally possible, but it is hard, especially nowadays with so much competition coming from students who actually graduate from design schools. Your portfolio might be the same level, but they're going to have discipline. They're going to have a bunch of stuff that you might not know of. They know how to take criticism. There's a lot of stuff that a school offers, but it is entirely possible to teach yourself and get into the business. It's been done and still being done today. But I think I'll break that into a separate podcast. Maybe the next one we'll talk about that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What's your opinion on master studies as a learning method? Totally fine. Okay, that's totally fine. Master studies, for those who don't know, is the copying of something that's great. For example, a copying a Leonardo da Vinci painting, or Michelangelo, or even Sid Mead or Frank Frazetta. As long as you're doing this as a teaching or a educational purpose, that's not a problem at all. We don't particularly teach this at the school. We just do fundamentals. That's actually what we do. But there's nothing wrong with copying a master. I did it quite a bit when I was in school. I also copy Sid Mead stuff and all the time. But just know that this is a copy. That is something that's part of your learning process. So don't claim that stuff for yourself. As long as you make it very clear, then it's fine. What I used to do is after I do a copy of Sid Mead, I used to throw the paper away because I was so afraid that this would show up and someone would say like, look, you copied Sid Mead. So I actually destroyed the originals. I don't show them to anyone. That I'll never post that online because it is a little dangerous when you have someone, or you copy something so famous. But generally, if you give credit, like, hey, look, this is my copy of Michelangelo's painting, then no one's going to care. This is something that's done by generations. Even they themselves back in the days copied each other to learn, right? So the masters versus their underlings. So not that big of a problem. In fact, you pick up a lot of techniques by copying, by brush strokes and how they apply their compositions and so forth. A lot of stuff to gain from that. Just make sure that you understand what you're doing is for learning and not for stealing or hijacking their color palettes and so forth, which start to get really, really into the sticky area of, okay, now you're just manipulating somebody else's work to make your own. So copying is a one-for-one thing, purely there to learn, and then destroy the version that you did and give credit to someone if someone sees it. Okay, next question. Paraphrasing this is that he's actually doing 3D right now in college, but he wants to switch into concept design. Is this something that's doable, or should he basically switch careers? Stay there, man. If you're in the school, again, this question actually also comes up quite a bit, which is a changing of career question, especially from 3D artist. Now, if you're in a situation in which you're learning 3D or you already are doing 3D, that's going to totally help in the concept stage. If you're in school, if you're close to finishing that program, then first finish it. Get that degree, get that diploma, whatever they're giving you. Get that first if you're close, because everything in your life helps in concept design. This business, I've mentioned so many times already, is not about the drawing at all. It really isn't. It's about what's in your head. The drawing is 5-10%, if that, of your job. Very little. Of course, when someone is learning to draw, drawing could seem to be 100%. You're just struggling just to draw a box in perspective, right? But after a few years, the drawing doesn't get that hard. It's not difficult to draw things, especially technical drawings that requires perspective. It's almost like mathematics. So you could draw any building, any car. It doesn't really matter. What actually makes it hard is, what do you draw? That is the most difficult part. So, and that experience comes from your life of where you're raised, what books you read, where do you travel to, what games you play, what films you watched. Everything in your life affects it. So even being a college, being a biochemist, being a engineering or whatever. We have students coming from all sorts of random backgrounds. We had a guy who come from selling oil rigs, right, in Russia. Turns out to be great concept artists because their mind has a lot of things in it that all we need to do was release that power by teaching them fundamentals, and that's it. So if you're in a 3D school, don't worry. Finish it. If you're a 3D artist transitioning, that 3D is going to help you big time. Okay, next question. Do you recommend to focus on traditional mediums for students? Not really. Now, we make our students do a little bit of that because we just want to, because it actually has nothing to do with paper or medium. It has to do with technique. It's just a little bit easier to learn your fundamentals on paper at first because you could use a ruler You could plot down your vanishing point, and you could pop your ruler right to VP1 or VP2. In Photoshop, there's no way to do that. You have to kind of do it by eyeball, sort of, or with a grid. But grids are a shortcut, and we don't want to teach anyone a shortcut in the beginning. So yes, we use paper, rulers, T-squares, pens in the very beginning. Not much that is traditional. So this actually comes down to what you like to work on. I've worked with concept artists with many, many years of experience that they still draw on paper because they like the feel of paper. And then they'll scan it in and paint it in Photoshop. But yeah, I knew a guy over at Blue Sky. They do all the Ice Age films, right? Still draws on paper because he loves the way paper feels when you sketch across it with a pencil. And you cannot get that experience on a Wacom. A Wacom is very slippery. It feels like plastic. You get used to it, but for some people, they just don't like it. So nothing wrong with it. Nobody cares. In this business, they only care about your result. If you want to draw traditionally, you can have a beautiful career and never really touch digital. That's totally fine. There's a bunch of guys in LA, they still storyboard traditionally on paper. So no problem there at all. All right, next question. When you get a design brief, how do you decide what process to use, whether to start with line work, collage, loop thumbnails, etc.? Well, this depends on the subject matter. If it's something like a Blue Sky concepts for a new video game that needs a bunch of environments, then I'll probably start with painting because that's the fastest way to get a bunch of ideas down. But if it was for, say, Call of Duty and they need a bunch of drones like submarine drones and hover drones and helicopter drones and water drones and space drones and stuff, that is actually faster to just draw it with line drawing. So yeah, it just depends on the subject matter. And as a concept artist, you do want to be versatile, not only to make sure that you use the fastest approach to the problem, but also it makes your job way more fun. If you could only paint, for example, then I can imagine that getting pretty boring after a while because you have no other approach. So for me, I like to switch stuff up. Sometimes most clients actually don't care. Recently, I worked on a film. The director didn't care at all what I did. So I just like, this week I just want to do line drawings. He's like, well, that's cool. Next week I'm doing digital painting. He doesn't care because he's looking at the design and he can see past the technique. He just wants to see what idea is actually in front of him. So in that case, I was like, okay, if he doesn't care, I'm just going to draw whatever I want. So draw, line drawing, thumbnails, painting, little sketchy stuff, silhouettes. So anything that gets the idea across, and that's pretty fun to do. All right, I think he has a follow-up question. Let me just read. I think his question, let me summarize. Same person asking the question, but it's basically saying concept artists often don't get credit for what they do. This is a pretty big gray area in terms of because how do I answer this? Because yes, what we do is important. We're driving the visuals, we're driving the designs. If you're working on Star Wars, those spaceships, those BB-8s and things, they're coming by somebody else. But you can't take credit for all of it because you could come in very egotistically or even very proud saying, look, I designed that, so I should get way more credit than other people deserve. My stuff is in front of the screen. But thinking from the other point of view, if there's no company behind it, if there's no marketing behind it, there's no story, there's no script, there's no 3D artists, there's no animators, no texture artists, no sound, no 3D modeler, no riggers, no mocap, no lip sync, no makeup, right? You remove the other 300-400 people or even 3,000 people, your design is still on paper. It takes a lot of work to make something go to reality. And to take credit for it, simply because you designed it, you're not telling the entire picture. And that's not fair because the guy who did the animation for BB-8, how about him? He animated BB-8 to make them all adorable. If BB-8 was just a stiff robot that doesn't move, would it be as marketable? Don't know. And also it's behind a franchise called Star Wars that spends millions in marketing to put your stuff out there. I used to tell our students, like the IP, how well IP does actually can dictate how good the design is. Because you can actually work on some really crappy films and games that come out and does nothing. And they might actually contain beautiful designs, but nobody will ever know about it. But I actually believe you could put a design in a mediocre, or you could put a mediocre design in a really giant hit film, and the design will be seen as that's so cool. I think it has to do with the success of the IP could also drive the design forward. It's not 100% of the time, but I think that has a lot to do with it because there are a lot of space films out there similar to Star Wars that might have designs better than what you see in Star Wars film. I mean, I worked on Star Wars films. I don't think some of the stuff we did is particularly the best, but because it's in Star Wars, it gets me into a Lego toy. It gets me into sculptures and collectibles. And you look at that, it's like, it's okay, but it's not groundbreaking. But everyone in the world knows about it because the company did a lot of work to put it there. So as a concept designer, you can't take full credit, in my opinion, because that's not fair to everybody else who's on the team. In fact, if you work for bigger studios, some might not even let you put your name on it. And younger artists will be like, well, I want to put my name on this. And they don't understand the concepts like, look, this is a team effort. Putting a game or film out there takes the work of hundreds, thousands of people. And why do you get the credit and nobody else does? And if you really think your design's the one that's pushing everything forward, you could try it. It's very easy. Put a drawing, do a design, and then put it on Kickstarter and tell people to give you millions of dollars to make it into a product, just on your drawing only. You'll probably find in reality that's not going to happen. No one's going to give you $1 million to buy your painting or design unless it's made into a product, especially with marketing behind it as well. So yeah, it's a business in which like we're kind of the unknowns, right? Before the internet came along, or became as big as today, we worked in a very secretive world in which we're involved behind the scenes, designing films and games, and nobody knew what we did. And you have to be okay with it. I'm okay with today. Everything I worked on the past 3-4 years, I don't even tell our students. I don't even tell anybody because I don't have any kind of desire to. Before I did it because I had to get a resume, I have to get jobs. But once you build enough name for yourself and resume, you don't have to put yourself out there anymore. The industry knows about you anyways, so they'll find you. So therefore, there's no need for me to show portfolios. And that's just part of being the business. It is a secretive business overall. And to get credit, like recognizable name credit, work for it. Just put your designs out there, make the studios know it. But in terms of public credit, it's going to be pretty hard. And I don't foresee a future in which somehow concept artists are credited for everything they do. It's pretty tricky. A little bit different if you're looking at Japan. Sometimes they'll do that. They'll put character designers in the front of a credit, but it is a different business out there in which character design for them is almost like casting the actors, because they value, I guess, novels and art a lot higher than, say, the West Side. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, we work in a uncredited, secretive business. And if you want to get famous off of it, pretty hard. Not going to happen. It's going to happen maybe within your own community, but in terms of outside audience, no one's going to know about it. And that's okay with me because, again, why I got into the business had nothing to do with fame, money, or anything. It's because I like to make games and films. Okay, next question. How would you explain to friends and family that it's possible to get paid to do concept design? Yeah, this is a tricky one because I think even today my parents have no idea what I really do. The best way to explain it, be successful at it. That's the easiest way, because actually most jobs, people don't know really what you do. But if you have a successful career, you're able to take care of your family, you're able to afford a house, or whatever you need to do to be comfortable in your living style, then I'm pretty sure your friends and family are going to be okay with it. I gave up explaining concept design to my parents a long time ago. Even when I first started out, they had no idea, because I think they're doctors, so they do things like 180 different than what I do. So I think for them, a computer could do a lot of what I could do. They don't see the difference that when I show them a digital painting, they think that by pressing buttons or something, the painting comes apart. Like, composition is by button, lighting is a button. So forget it. It's like I'm not going to explain this to them, even though they know traditional painting could be painted by hand. But once it's in the computer, it's starting to like, is the programming lighting for you? Is the computer lighting? Forget it. And also in terms of what we do, it's like, how do you come up with stuff if there's only a script? It's almost impossible. It's such a hard business to be in. So instead, just do well, earn a good living, have a good career, and everybody will be pretty happy about it. All right, next question. We're barely a quarter through this, so we'll see how far we get. All right, have you ever considered publishing a handbook covering some of the basics, not covering your videos? No, because you guys, for one, I don't have time, and two, there's a great series of books already been done with this, and that's Scott Robertson's books. Go get them. Design Studio Press, Scott Robertson. He's got how to draw, how to paint, or how to render, I think. Some of the best books you could possibly get. This is the same guy who taught me how to do the stuff I'm doing today. So you're in very good hands, and there's no way I could do a book that's gonna have more information than what Scott already provides you. So yeah, just grab his books. They're great. All right, next question. This guy's basically talking about that he's a line artist and he's having a hard time, and it's very smooth. His lines are very smooth. How do you get to do other kind of work or other kind of technique? And my answer to that would be, try a different brush. Try something completely different in Photoshop. It's fun. Or watch some other concept art on YouTube doing something. Pick up their way of starting. I used to pick this up when I first watched Craig Mullins start painting, because this is in year 1999, 2000, somewhere in the early 2000s. It was the first time I seen Craig do a live painting in Photoshop. And the way I used to paint used to be very traditional approach. You do a line drawing, and then you slowly build up your paint, your base, and then you detail, right? Very traditional approach. And Craig comes in and just like blasted canvas with a collage of paint strokes, no line drawings, nothing, and just start to pick out the compositions and the drawings from within the kind of almost chaotic background. I've never seen that before. I was like, what kind of crazy black magic approach is this? And he started coming up with this girl's arm, and then she's like smoking a cigarette with a very sexy hand, just coming out of a void. And I went home and just like totally tried it and just fell in love with it. Like, wow, there are other ways to paint. So if you do line drawings all your life, maybe switch to a charcoal pencil or something. Just break the rules once in a while. It's very important, and have some fun doing it. Okay, next question. How do I organize my references? This person is basically saying, well, for me, it's years and years of reference gathering. I have a folder of a couple of terabytes of references. And I used to organize them quite nicely, but nowadays I give up. There's too many folders. I just kind of put them in by moods, by color, by theme. So it could be like city, and under city I have Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Egypt, and whatever. But it gets pretty messy after a while, because how do you define mood that's like a sunset with the pyramids behind it versus that should just go into Egypt culture folder? So I start to get pretty messy, but when you start to work with your own references, you sort of know where everything is at. So when I'm looking for something, I can generally find it pretty quickly. I have a kind of like a mind map of where all my references sort of sit. And if you're doing this for a professional career, you will definitely have that kind of thing as well. Okay, so next question will be, this one's being asked, which has to do with procrastination. In this case, he's talking about his work not being good enough, so he gives up. And I think I addressed that earlier. Don't do this. Good enough. It's good to have self-criticism. It's important, right? You have to be able to look at your own work and be like, man, this is not good. I gotta get better. But you can't let that drive you down either. You can't be so critical of your own work that you don't go forward. So one, don't do this for other people, right? If no one sees it, then nobody knows that you're bad, right? So first of all, draw in your own thing first, right? Don't draw this for somebody else to see. That relieves a ton of pressure already. Keep these files on yourself. You're just practicing. So even the drawing sucks, who cares? If you're drawing something, it comes out, you have fun doing it, you're learning something, then you are doing something correct. Don't let this stuff get you down. If you can't survive this part of it, the industry is a lot worse. Trust me on this, because producers, executives, other art directors, they might not be so nice with your designs. They might give you very critical feedback. They might give you all sorts of stuff they got to deal with. And as a professional, that is just part of the job. A client has every right to say your stuff is not meeting the mark, because they're paying you to give them a design. So you have to deal with things like rejection, things not looking so good, and mentally solve these issues to not let it bring you down and so forth. I understand. I think if you're younger, you're just starting to draw, starting to get into this business, it can be very depressing when you don't have good work, or people don't say good stuff about your work perhaps. This will go away. You do this for 5-10 years, you just don't care anymore, because you have a career. Once you have a career, nothing matters. People can say whatever they want, but hey, look, you have a career, you have a job, you're doing great. So that overrides that, I guess, a confidence level that younger kids tend to not have. And the way to build confidence is you got to have experience. Keep doing it till you're very comfortable with this skill set, that nothing phases you. So to keep drawing, even if it sucks, just keep drawing. Don't stop doing it. And also, when you're drawing, don't procrastinate. Don't have Facebook. Don't have any of this stuff open. And this goes back to the thing I mentioned earlier. If something else is so distracting to you that you'd rather do that, put that away, or reevaluate if you really want to draw or design for a living. Because if you just cannot stop doing something else, and that something else is way more fun, then maybe this is not the business for you, especially if you could put that thing away. For example, turn off the PCs, turn off the PlayStations, and be in a room to just draw, and you're in your own world. You're on some other planet when you're drawing this. You got what it takes. But your mind's constantly saying, oh man, I got to go finish that level in XCOM 2. Maybe drawing is not addictive enough for you to make it into a career. So you got to just be a little honest with yourself and decide that. All right, next question. Are you going to do a video on character design? Sure, I'll do one maybe when I have time. Right now, it's quite tricky for me to do the painting or drawing version design cinema, but I will try. Next question. Is it possible to get a job for NASA with the kind of training that we have in entertainment? Yes, and I've known people who've done that. Of course, to get a job at NASA, you have to demonstrate quite a bit of science knowledge and biology and so forth in your design work, because they hire people to, for example, imagine other planets, other life, and you're going to have at least a very, not just knowledge, but love for this kind of thing. So if some scientist is telling you a bunch of things about a possible visual for a planet, You have to like it just as much as a scientist is researching it. So yes, it's very possible. And in fact, there are these kind of companies that look for outsiders to participate on the work. I have done a few in the past. A few years ago, I actually did some stuff for car companies on real cars, because for them, they're like, hey, look, you work on Hollywood stuff and video games. Maybe you have ideas that we didn't even think about. So why don't you come in for a few days and just brainstorm random ideas that what would you do if this is a film car, right? Like a car for a futuristic film or something. What would you put in it? Because what they're looking for is maybe the idea that we come up with a little bit too ahead of time, but the core concept of it is useful. And you actually see entertainment, or actually real products emulate entertainment. If we recall the movie Minority Report, Tom Cruise using that screen to shrink and enlarge photos. That stuff was before the iPhone. And what you see in the Apple phone basically was already in that film. And you see tons of stuff, that kind of thing happening in entertainment. I think satellite, the concept of satellite was from Ray Berry books, right? And then NASA saw that as like, hey, we could probably do that. So yes, the concepts that we come up with sometimes might be far-fetched, but scientists and engineers could look at that, go, hey, why not? Why don't we build that? So even when I was doing the car stuff, I was coming up with just, some pretty fun stuff. For example, you have live streaming from the car in the front, and then you could watch this online. Someone driving through somewhere interesting, they could just click a button on the steering wheel and it's recording the 360 degree around the car. And I'm pretty sure that's going to become a reality pretty soon with VR goggles coming in. Some of these vehicles might have that built in, because you also use that to track the position of a car. For example, you order an Uber and you want to see where it's at, you just turn on view cam and you can see like, oh, it's driving down in traffic. And there's a lot of uses for this kind of stuff, but it's a very entertainment design thinking, but could definitely be applied. So yes, you could work for NASA if you showed the proper type of stuff in your portfolio. Okay, let me check the time. We're 40 something minutes in. Okay, next question. They often see students come to our school with a background in industrial design. If they don't, will they do well? Actually, that is not true. Most of our students don't have a background in industrial design. They have background, generally, I say about 60% of our students have a background in traditional drawing skills. Like most of them went to a art schools of some kind, so they picked up traditional drawings, but they're anywhere close to industrial design. We do get them once in a while. Maybe 10-20% of students come from a product or architect background, but the rest have nothing. So again, this business don't really need this stuff. We will teach it to you. Fundamentals is something that anyone could learn. It's very similar to math. It's very similar to basic grammar. It's hard, it's time consuming, it's boring as hell, but you can learn it. And once you learn it, it's up to you how you want to apply it. So if your passion is design to come up with new things, then we basically give you the key to do so, right? Just like an author. We all can speak English, but authors use grammar, or not just English, we can speak a language. What authors do is they take that language and tell a story. So if you think you could take the fundamentals rules of drawing and apply it to a design, then you could do well in this business. So yeah, so having an industrial design background versus not, sometimes it plays very little in terms of who does well, who doesn't do well. Okay, next question is, when I do a painting, do I still think about hues, chroma values, and stuff like that? Or does it come basically built in? The answer to that, yes, it pretty much comes built in. For me at this point, you've been doing this for so long, a lot of stuff just comes like sort of like riding a bicycle. You don't have to think about kicking the wheels forward and steering or balancing your body on a bike. It just comes naturally. So, but in the beginning, you have to learn these things the hard way. When I started painting, you have to pay attention to your values. You have to check your hues. A lot of stuff you got to do. And these are things that if you're in an art school or something like that, they'll teach it to you. So, but once you're doing enough, yeah, you don't have to do it that much. Next question. What are your thoughts on opacity, strength on brush? Myself, I use generally 80 to 90% opacity. I don't go any lower than that unless I'm doing something like fog or smoke. But this is also personal preference. But I do find it easier to be painting in higher opacity, like 80-90%, because it tends to control your paint better, so you don't get into the muddy zone, which happens really easily in Photoshop if you're not careful. So yeah, I like to work with high opacity. Okay, next question. How many layers I like to use in my paintings? And what do I do on each layer? Actually, I don't use layers much at all. I use at tops 2-3 layers. And I generally start a layer to try something new. Like I smash the layers down to 1, and then I'll start painting on a new layer for a while. And if it looks good, I'll smash that down or collapse it down, keep painting, and end up generally just 1 layer. I don't like to work with too many layers. This probably has to do with my traditional background of learning stuff on paper and on canvas. That layers, I don't I mean, in a way, it kind of hurts me because I don't use layers to its advantage. I know you could do a lot of cool stuff with masks. You could do a lot of stuff with shapes and all sorts of stuff you could do with layers, especially with newer versions of Photoshop. But, what I use right now, it works. It's old school. It's more traditional. It's probably slower, but it works. And right now in my career, I have a lot more stuff to worry about than Photoshop and drawing, because I'm almost entirely on design these days, or design thinking. I don't do much drawings and painting at all. So it's almost like, maybe there's no need for me to learn this at this point. But if you're younger, definitely pick those up because there's so many ways to do this kind of thing. Okay, next question. When I have a sketchbook, do you recommend sketching from life or from your own imagination? Simple answer, do whatever you want. This is for concept design, that is. If you're trying to train yourself to be an illustrator and you have to paint really gorgeous paintings, I think studying from life is important. Now, for a concept designer, it is not the most important, because I've met a lot of concept designers who don't come from traditional illustration skills that do well, because we study more about what things are actually there. We could kind of reverse engineer the lighting, the perspective, just using fundamentals. So our stuff generally don't look lifelike. Most concept art, or quote-unquote concept art, is not meant to be photoreal or to capture the perfect illustration, because that's not what we do. We're not there to do that. We're here to sell design. So for concept artists, I think the best bet is to draw things that inspire you. If you want to know how a motor works, draw the engine, draw the little gears. If you want to know how a hook or a pulley works on a ship, figure out how the pulley works. That's actually more important than, for example, how does a warm light bounce on the backside of a pulley and have that light bounce into a girl's arm, and what is her skin tone. That stuff is a little bit less important. It's obviously good to have that, but it is way less important than the actual design itself. So hopefully that makes sense. It's design is about the problem solving. Art is about the technique and how good you could capture emotions and colors and skin tones. That stuff is generally not that important concept, especially just doing line art. None of that stuff even exists. So, but in the ideal world, you should have both. So draw whatever you want in your sketchbook. All right, next question. When you're pitching your design, how much do you worry about style? Or he's basically asking how much personal styling does he inject? Another question that might sound like common sense, but it's don't worry about it. Just design first. Styles are born out of concept artists who are well known. For example, Frank Frazetta, maybe Sid Mei, or even a lot of Japanese artists. The guy who draws Metal Gear Solid, for example, I forgot his name. Very, very distinct style, right? But the thing is, you go back and look at their work when they're in school, they didn't draw like that. They drew like everybody else in their class, student work. And that's where you should start. Start with the basics, start with the fundamentals, do your stuff correctly, and within time, the style will be born on its own. You don't have to go out there to look for one. Just draw. Everyone comes up with their stuff on their own. I don't think Frank Frazetta, when he started out, say, I'm going to copy someone who looks like Frank Frazetta, because he's the one who came up with it. He just did it by drawing. Same thing with the guy who draws Metal Gear Solid. It's like, maybe he got inspired by watercolor or something, but that was born out of experience. So try to force yourself down a style. Sometimes it can be dangerous because you start to emulate too much and you start to take shortcuts. You're not learning the things the right way. So just draw stuff the traditional way, paint stuff the traditional way, and let time solve the style for you. Okay, next question is sort of related. Just how do you feel about specialization in a certain area? For example, being good at painting environments versus characters. This has to do with what you like to do. It's not really specialization for me. It's more about the subject matter. So for myself, I love military, I love science fiction, and those are the things I focus on because, again, we're doing design, and design has just infinite amount of stuff to study. So I'd rather spend my time studying how gears work, how weapon systems work, how spaceship fly, or how an airplane flies, and so forth. So I spend most of my time understanding that particular subject matter, versus I'm very weak in terms of like medieval armor design. It's just something I don't have an interest in. So I don't know how hooks work on an armor. I don't know how even a knight wears his armor in the proper order. I have no idea, because I personally have no interest in that thing. I don't mind playing the games and watching films with knights and stuff, but I don't have any particular interest in designing. So I don't spend time focusing on that. So I think this question more to do with, if you're thinking from a design point of view, what do you like to design, and focus on that. If you like hardware, then do be the best, know everything about it. Because again, it doesn't come down to the art, it comes down to your solutions. So, and to find a solution, you have to understand the problem. So you got to just spend your time studying. So if you like environments, then paint environments and study environments. If you like characters, especially a particular type of character, then focus on that. You got to just wholly dominate the subject matter that you know about. And if you like everything, then do everything. It's not restricted by drawing. It's restricted by knowledge. So everything has to do with understanding. All right, next question here. We're about halfway through, 50 minutes. Let's see how far this could run. I might break this a little bit and then just continue with another episode, or just take a quick break and come back to it. All right, this question actually I already answered, which is he feels like he's not progressing anymore, and he cannot. Actually, this is a different question. He's not progressing anymore, and he's not very good at self-teaching and cannot afford art schools. Well, I think this comes back to, do you really want to do this? Because if you cannot self-teach yourself and you are not progressing, then something is making you get stuck. Maybe the passion, the motivation is not there. That could be due to the fact that no one's teaching you this kind of stuff, or it also could be due to the fact that you don't have a true interest in doing this kind of work, because there's so much stuff out there to learn from. There's so much tutorials, there's Gumroad, and every concept artist nowadays have some kind of tutorial on somewhere, on Patreon. You could even get their PSD files. So in terms of resource, there's so much of it out there that if you don't have motivation to seek them out, then maybe this is not the business. If you're not self-teaching and you can't afford an art school, this is the best time ever to learn, because like I mentioned, you could go to Gumroad, you could go find Nicholas Sparth and all sorts of people who have tutorials, and most of them are either free or so cheap. It's like cost of coffee. You could get their entire video and download their PSD files. So the places to learn, just tons. And you got to just figure out, is that what you want to do? Do you want to learn from these guys, or do you just want to, have someone come along and give you a secret to make you somehow really, really good? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, there are no secrets. No one's going to come along and give you a spark of a creativity or a secret that's going to propel you to the next level. It simply doesn't exist. If it did, like I said, we'll be teaching it to our students, but there isn't. It's hard work, it's labor, it's stress, it's mental game, all that kind of stuff is there, and you have to fight through that to do this. And if you can't, not the right business. Okay, next question is same thing with procrastination, so I'll skip it. This has person to do with he's always lazy, he doesn't have the inspiration to do it. Then it's like maybe this is not the business for you, because if you don't like something, man, then obviously you have no motivation to do so, and you're trying to procrastinate. Like for example, you want me to go study how to make medicine for pharmaceutical companies, even if the salary or the job is like super, super nice, I have zero interest to go to a chemistry school to learn how to make pills, for example, but even though maybe everybody around me is doing it and the internet makes it seem so cool, and you can learn a lot of money doing this and have an awesome lifestyle, and like it's the thing to make pills now for medical companies, right? And everyone around you is doing this, Gumroad tutorials how to make it. You cannot make me make pills in the chemistry lab. There's no way. I have no interest, right? So in concept art, same thing. Like, it might be really cool to see it online and see it on magazines and E3 and all these kind of IGN, GameSpot, and so forth. But you gotta have a love for it first. Don't get into it because it's popular, trendy, or pays well, where it seems kind of fun and easy. You're gonna have to do this for a living. So find the passion, as they say. Okay, next question. What age should I go to Art Center? This is more personal, what I do out of LA. I sort of mentioned that last episode, I think, but I was at Art Center at age 17, 18. I didn't finish my college. I went from high school, I went to UC Berkeley. This is in 94, 95. I went to UC Berkeley up in San Francisco. Did not like what I was doing there in architecture, so I drove back down to Los Angeles and found my way into Art Center. Almost went to Cal Arts. Cal Arts is more for Disney animation. But I went to Art Center instead, so I was about 18, 19 was when I was there. And after that, I went to Wargen in Austin to work, and the rest I think I covered in the podcast. But yeah, I was there quite young. In a way, I'm sort of fortunate. I got into the average age for design schools is about 26. It's the same for our school here as well. The average is definitely in the mid to high 20s. So being there that young was kind of, I guess, a lucky thing. I just figured out what I want to do really early on. Okay, next question. Okay, concept artists mentioned in interviews that 3D is becoming a big part of this business. Is that true? Do I need to know 3D? Yes, knowing 3D is very, very beneficial, especially if you're working for a studio that is, some actually require this to be part of your resume, because you will be working within 3D software. Some require to even model some of the stuff yourself. So the more you know, the better, because 3D is just a tool. So is your wrist and your arms, your eyeball. These are all tools. Photoshop is a tool. So if you can use all these tools together to design, then it's a welcome addition to your skill set. And knowing 3D is a fast tool, especially things like ZBrush and SketchUp. They're relatively easy to learn, to use. So yeah, it's pretty beneficial, and I think definitely going to the future, more and more studios will require this, and also gives you an edge on competition, because if a concept artist has this kind of stuff in your portfolio, I mean, two different people, one has great work, the other one also has great work, but one has more 3D on top of that person now has a better advantage over you than the other. So All right, let's do one more question, then we'll take a really quick break. Where do you think the video game industry is heading in the next couple of years? Is it going to be viable industry working? Or do you think it's become a sink or swim industry? Big question, because I cannot predict the future, but in terms of what we work on and what the industry is doing, it's definitely not going away, that's for sure. The game industry is not going to suddenly just die out and not make any money and kind of fade into obscurity. But it is changing quite rapidly. You have giant publishers now starting to take charge of a lot of things, kind of like Hollywood films in the, say, about 70s to 80s, in which you went from indie film studios all of a sudden to your Paramounts, to Foxes, to DreamWorks, and these giant dominating companies. You're starting to get that on the game side as well, in which EA, Ubisoft, Activision and stuff, they're the only ones who can afford to make big games that look good. And it's also driven by the demands of the consumers. Gamers want photoreal graphics. Gamers want all these kind of things. I don't know if they want it, but these things do well. Market-wise, they sell a lot. So therefore, these companies continue to produce them. But to produce these games, you need a lot of money. And the only way to get a lot of money is you have a giant corporation behind it. So I don't know what that's going to do to the game industry as a whole. I'm not sure that hurts it. I think in terms of gameplay, personally, I feel like it's definitely hurting it a little bit. Games are becoming a little bit more generic, but they look great. They look really beautiful. But they're not that, in my opinion, as fun and addicting as the games I grew up playing. Like even today, I still play my old PlayStation 2 games and even Nintendo games, believe it or not. I find those games to be way more fun because I think part of the industry has forgotten what games are, which is to have fun, to leave reality and enjoy yourself. Now games has more stress than my work. You have to track like multiple tasks. You have all these things to do and a lot of pressure to like perform something. Versus you play a simple like RPG game, you're in like another world, and yes, there are tasks to do and stuff like that, but the game is made to be fun. So I don't know, that's just my personal opinion, but that's not going away. But you are seeing a shift in the way games are developed because of the amount of money that's put in. So in terms of risky design, doing something that's a little bit out there, getting onto a project that's going to change the face of gaming, it gets harder and harder now due to the overall publishing domination. But of course, you're getting a huge rise in indie game development with Kickstarter and Steam Greenlight and so forth. So yeah, no idea where the industry is going to head it, but it's not going away. And mobile is going to become a huge thing. I'm sure most of you guys don't want to hear that because mobile, most of us don't play games on mobile probably, but it is going to be a big business because in terms of monetary reasons, you can make a lot of money on these kind of platforms because everybody's got a phone in their pockets now, and if you make games on them, you can make more money. So and this hardware can get faster and faster, so you can start doing like PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 level of graphics on your tablets and phones. So there's going to be a lot of middleware, mid-core, we call it mid-core games in development for these particular hardware. Good thing, bad thing, no idea. But for us designers, it's all pretty fun. It doesn't really matter because we cannot control the market. We cannot control how a game is fun or not fun. That's something that's completely out of our hands. We can only do our job in terms of making the visuals as cool as we possibly can. But rest assured, if you're going to try to pursue a job in concept art, it's not going to go away. Just the type of work you do might change, but the actual technique is not going to go away. All right, let me take a quick pause here. Okay, let's try to wrap up the rest of these questions. We have about 20 more to go, so let's jump right into it. Do you think the illusion of functionality is enough for concept artists, or the real functionality is necessary? This depends on what you're trying to do. The more you can illusion that design, probably the more believable design across. We never really have to solve everything. In terms of like joins or door opening and making sure that can seal back to design, that stuff is pretty important because you cannot fake that kind of thing. What I'm talking about is you do a vehicle and the door can open. You got to make sure it actually open and fill the negative space and so forth. But in terms of like landing gear and having all those little pistons work, it's not that necessary. But you have to have the illusion of making it work, and that goes back to understanding how things functions. So the more you know how it works, for example, even little door handles, little things for your hand to hold on to on military vehicles, the position of those kind of things are somewhat important because they sort of have to make sense. But at the end of the day, we're here to entertain. We're not here to make things work. Pretty much anything we design entertainment, none of it works. X-Wing fighters, Millennium Falcons, any vehicle, any kind of sci-fi thing or fantasy creatures, none of them really work. But they look like they do. And that level of illusion comes from the experience of the concept designer themselves. So yes, know your subject matter so you know how to make that illusion happen, because you cannot fake it. It's actually very easy to catch someone who's faking functional design because they just add gibberish, versus someone who obviously knows engineering. For example, they really know how a military tank thread works, or they really know how a gun turret mount works. So when they fake one for a science fiction project, it still feels extremely believable. And that just comes from experience. Okay, next question. What does it mean when someone tells me that my concept portfolio has no design? Well, they're probably saying that your work is probably, my guess, mostly drawings of existing things or just studies of things, like a very art-centric portfolio. To design, you have to solve problems. Go review my portfolio episode in Design Cinema, even episode 1 of what this industry is. You have to put in things in there that are solving problems and giving you solutions to a variety of things. Have subject matters like you're designing for a game or a film or a book. Have something that tells that you are taking words on a page or a script and developing that into visual solutions versus just drawing things purely for the sake of drawing things. And that's going to lack design, or designing things without any kind of design breakdown or design thinking, like you're drawing armor design or fashion design clothes just randomly. There's no function involved behind it. There's no purpose behind it. And that kind of stuff generally could result in a portfolio that just looks like a concept portfolio, but actually isn't, because it doesn't solve anything. Case in point being, like, you could draw a sexy babe or something holding a giant sword wearing a random bikini. What exactly does that solve? It doesn't solve anything. It might be a cool illustration, but it's not doing anything. But if you start building this character up into, like, okay, this is a Tomb Raider design, this is Lara Croft when she's 35 years old, and now she's going back into the field or something, and now she's going to wear this kind of clothes, wear this kind of equipment. Okay, now you're starting to design, because the subject matter, the objects that she surrounds herself with must be thought out versus random, like the young girl wearing a strip of fabric or something like that, a couple bells hanging off her legs or something. Kind of just random just to be there, but looks kind of cool. Oftentimes you find that the stuff doesn't do much in terms of concept design because there's no use for that. And very few projects need that kind of design. Most of the time we need things that has to have spec attached to it. And I did a design cinema on that. I think it's designed to spec. Maybe watch that as well. Okay, next question. Besides the work itself, is there anything else I could present to the clients to impress them? For example, technical information or references? Yes and no. When you're freelancing, generally not, because freelancers are paid just for the designs themselves, and they generally don't have too much time to work with you to talk things through. But if you are a in-house artist, you could definitely put up as much stuff as you possibly can, because you're in there every day. You can pull the art directors over, the creative art directors, and tell them references, show them whatever you want, actually. And I do the same. If I'm working in-house, I'll work with the artist. If I'm art directing, for example, I'll look at everything they're showing me. If they want to show me references, some book they read the night before, that's all fine, because I get to go inside that designer's head. But if I'm working with a freelancer and I give him something to do, the only thing I really have to come back with is the design. I'm assuming that he's a professional, and whatever is delivered is research and properly have whatever behind it, that I don't need to see the process. I only need to see the result. So yeah, just depending on where you work. Okay, next question is quite long, but I'm going to summarize it, which is, this person has gone to film school, want to become a director/writer, but at the same time also wants to do concept art and is wondering which one to choose, or are they both beneficial? And my answer, yes, both are very good. In fact, if you think about it, a director, a writer, and a concept artist, we're all doing exactly the same thing, which is telling story through visuals, or through, in terms of a writer, it's turning words, but those words will eventually turn to visuals in your head. So having these three skills, either of them could actually crisscross, and you see directors doing that. You look at Ridley Scott, you look at James Cameron. These are guys who could write, direct, and draw at the same time, because to them it's the same creative process. And you could of course do this yourself. In fact, you'll probably make a very good director if you can actually sketch pretty well, and you could write and you could direct. So that way you can have full control over the IPs that you are doing. When we were working with James Cameron, this guy come in with a little napkin paper and draw right next to you, because he has illustration skills, right? So he doesn't draw that bad. Ridley Scott, same thing. That guy could storyboard and stuff like that. So yeah, it doesn't hurt at all. And if you want to finish your film school, finish that first, and then come back and maybe visit a illustration school or concept school, get all that stuff under your belt, and go out and choose one. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to start doing some concepts first, or do you want to concept and then direct your own concepts? It opens up a lot of things for you to do if you're multi-talented like that. Okay, next one is, this person is basically 35 years old, self-taught, no experience. Do they have a chance? How do I answer this? Because it's pretty tricky. Because the ideal answer would be, okay, age doesn't really matter. But the reality is it sort of does. Okay, let me try to explain this. One, when you're older, your energy level is not the same as a 21-year-old. No way. Okay, like my age right now, I'm much older now than when I first started. I cannot do this all day, all night without a break. No way. But when I was 21, 22, I'll freelance 2-3 days in a row with very little sleep because I loved it. I love that feeling of being on coffee, being on Red Bull, and just like blazing through projects. And you actually look forward to that high that you get. But now, no way, I'm not going to stay up all night doing concept. I don't want to do it at all. That's why I don't do it anymore. I rarely draw and paint except when I do demos for our students because I don't have that energy level anymore. You have to have a lot of physical and mental energy for this business. So the older you get, the energy level is going to start drop off. And that's just reality. There's nothing you can do about it. And I was keeping shape too. I work out every week, 3-4 times a week. I work out, I go running. I'm pretty fit, but in terms of that energy level that a young person have, no way, because that's a whole other type of energy. It's this kind of almost like too much energy trapped, and you want to just get that out doing work. I look at our students. They go out and learn 3D software. They go out and paint on their own time. They're learning techniques all the time. They're on Facebook posting like gorgeous paintings because they're just so hungry. They're so eager, and they're young. They have the energy level to go out and go look at Gumroad, look at this, learn from Sparth, learn from Brainstorm, learn from whatever other schools out there. Just constantly absorbing. For me, I just don't have the energy to do that, and that's one of the things that age will do to you. The other will be your level of acceptance of ideas. I guess what I mean by that is that the older you get, a little bit more trapped you are in a certain way of doing something. When you are young, the level of influence is everywhere. You could be inspired by this guy, and start painting this way, start drawing that way, and your shapes and designs are constantly changing. I look at my portfolio from 10 years ago. I worked on so many different things, and the languages I was coming up with was very, very different. But as I get older, they start to tend to go down the same path because you get comfortable. And that just do with your brain. You're very set on a certain way of doing something, and it's hard to get out of that, especially for design language. And in a way, it's beneficial because nowadays studios come after us because of the certain language I have developed. But at the same time, it prevents you from maybe working on other things. So yes, age plays these factors. And another will be in studios, if you're a junior person but you're older, it's a little bit awkward because you might even have a boss who is much, much younger than you, and that could create a very strange situation. I was in that situation as an art director at NCSoft. I was a creative art director. I was age 27, 28, somewhere around there. I think 28. And I was in charge of an art department that had artists that were 40, 50 years old, ex-artists from Disney and so forth. And it was just a really awkward situation because these guys are much, much older than me, almost double my age, but yet they are paid as well as their position is much lower than me. So it just created awkwardness in the office because you're like, hey, you need to work on this. And you could tell they're not very happy about it because they have a level of seniority. So for studios, they find that to be a little strange too, that you're coming in much, much older, but yet you're a junior artist. Now, some might not care, but it does, you could feel it because at the end of the day, we're people, and people have respect for people who are a little bit older in age groups. So it's awkward when you put someone in an older situation into a junior position. So be aware of that. It could be strange or it cannot. And last one would be like the older you get, also it's hard to learn new techniques. And some of these techniques are very tricky. For example, you go to a studio that uses the Unreal Engine, and they might sit you down for a 2-day or 3-day lesson on how to use the Unreal Engine to mock stuff up. When I was young, I loved that stuff, man. I love sitting behind a programmer as they explain to me like algorithms or how to calculate rain formulas or something like that. Half of it, I have no idea what they're talking about, but to see them do it energizes me. I find it to be very interesting. Now, I just don't have the brain capacity to sit through something that technical. I remember last year I was at GDC, and someone was showing me some new rendering software to how to basically texture, like very photorealistic textures. And I just looked at the steps that it takes to do this. Like click. There's like 100 different things I have to do. And then the render comes out and looks beautiful. But I'm like, I don't think I'll ever use this software. It is way too much work to learn this at this point of my life. And that age will do that to you. But is it possible to do this? Of course, 35 actually is not that old. But just be aware of the competition you're putting up with. All the things I mentioned. Because someone coming out at their 22, 23 years old, they're eager to learn. They're very open. They're very hungry. They have high energy. And it's hard to compete with them, especially your junior artists yourself. That they'll tend to, and also younger kids tend to stay behind at jobs. You don't have any kind of thing to worry about. When you're older, you might have a family. You have other responsibilities that you cannot stay at work till midnight, for example. Younger kids, nothing to do. When I was at Blur, I had nothing else to do. 22, 23 years old, I'm working at an awesome studio. So you don't go home, you just hang out. And everyone there's the same age. So you just hang out. You order pizza, you draw, you watch movies, and you draw, you goof around, you go do some mocap, you do whatever, because the studio has all sorts of fun toys to play around with. But as you get older, you're like, dude, it's 7 o'clock, man, I need to go home. So that's the kind of stuff you got to face, which is reality. All right, next question, which is, I live in Russia in a small town which has no good education. Is it possibly self-taught? Yes, I mentioned that before. You have to just be very proactive and put yourself in a schedule. If you're going to self-teach, which this will come up a few times, people asking about how to teach yourself. Again, I'll break this up to a different podcast in the future. But one of the best way to do it is treat it like a real program, like a real school. Give yourself a schedule to be on. Give yourself homework. If you don't do that, it's almost impossible in my opinion, because there's way too many distractions in this business. You need hundreds of hours of practice. So if you're not in school right now and you're not doing anything, you have maybe financial means to not have to go to work every day. What you could do is, okay, every Monday I'm studying this from 9 to 6. Tuesday I'm studying this. And give yourself exactly what a student will go through and do the homework. Do this every single day. And do it in a room that looks like a classroom. Open up a studio area somewhere in your bedroom or living room and treat that as a learning center. Have tutorials downloaded, organize them to folders, and just tell yourself, okay, Wednesday is my study everything from Sparth, right? Thursdays is another chapter in Scott Robertson's book, and do every single homework at least 10 times. You do that for half a year to a year, you will definitely learn a lot of stuff. But if you're doing it kind of like a hobby, is pretty tricky. Like once in a while I do a painting, you watch a tutorial, which by the way, watching tutorials means nothing if you don't do the homework. You can watch hundreds and hundreds of videos online and read books, but if you don't actually practice it, it doesn't do a single thing. Maybe it'll do like 1-2% of something, but it won't do anything. Otherwise, everyone could learn. We just play videos out there in our school and everyone will be good. But no, we have to assign homework. Just like watching basketball play, right? I used to use that. You could watch Kobe Bryant dribble basketball all day and shoot hoops. But unless you pick up a basketball and try it, it's nothing that video could do will help you if you don't pick up a basketball. So, all right, next question. Is it legitimate to be picky about art direction when choosing what job to take? Does it burn bridges to refuse or quit a job? No, of course not. But of course, if you're in a junior position, I don't advise you guys to skip jobs. Do them all because you need the experience. But yes, as you get older, you could definitely, and have experience, then you could definitely turn down jobs. And you're not going to offend nobody. I turned down jobs a lot when I was freelancing. And the company will still come back to you because you simply tell them it's either the subject don't interest you or you're too busy. They understand you're a busy person. You're a professional. You can't take everything that comes in. And we just tell them, look, this is a subject matter we're not comfortable with. So therefore, we're going to skip it. And they'll come back to you with something else when they feel like that's something you want to work on. Even last year, we rejected a very, very big game. The AAA, big as it gets kind of thing. But they were asking me to design creatures. I'm like, what? I'm not good at that kind of stuff, man. I'm a hardware guy. I like science fiction. I like spaceships and mountains and things like that. I don't do too many creature designs. But for some reason, this company wanted to ask me if I want to do a bunch of monster designs and creatures and all so forth. I ended up rejecting the job. I go, look, this is not my comfort level. I could probably do it, but it's not going to be as good as if you go to someone who's really, really good at this kind of stuff. And nothing happened. Studios like, that's totally fine. We totally understand. And later they came back asking if I'm going to do some environments. So it's just, yes, you could do this. Just make sure you reject it very professionally. You don't be mean about it or egotistic about it. Just be honest. Just tell them you're not comfortable or don't like the subject matter, and they'll totally understand. Okay. Next question has to do with someone asking if software like SolidWorks and industrial design, these kind of things are useful because they're in a very industrial design school and they're using things like SolidWorks. These kind of softwares are very production oriented. They're meant, for those who don't know, these are software meant for CNC machines, like the 3-headed or 5-directional CNCs. It's basically a drill that can make objects out of foam, like hard foam. So if you program a SolidWorks for a car, for example, this drill could actually sculpt out the car for you, and some are really high resolution that by the end of the day you have a 1/8 scale car basically sculpted for you. But you have to use very specific software for this type of thing, and SolidWorks is for that. It's to make products, even real products like mouse and keyboards and so forth. I don't know how useful that's going to be for the entertainment industry because we never go that hardcore with 3D. Knowing your ZBrush and SketchUp and so forth is very useful because we use that to mock stuff up. But these are 3D software that's pretty much work. It's like AutoCAD, for example. Knowing AutoCAD is not very beneficial. It's good to know it, but you're not going to use much of it on your daily job because we simply don't do that. But like I mentioned earlier, knowing stuff is always helpful so go ahead and learn it, but you probably won't be using it much in this business. Maybe unless you want to do some 3D printing with your designs, then it'll come in handy. Next question, do you think concept will ever fall into obscurity? I sort of answered that earlier. No, concept art is not going to go away until they make the mind reading machine or some kind of a 3D software that could generate concept, which is very possible, but no one seems to be doing it because this industry simply isn't big enough to make software like that, right? Photoshop is primarily used for photographers, for example. So there's a huge market for that. So Photoshop constantly makes itself better, but mostly aimed at photographers. I don't think Photoshop cares too much about the concept industry. So to actually have a software made specific concept artists that can help or replace us, probably unlikely. We're just too small for business to make sense monetarily, right? What I'm saying is, what I'm basically suggesting is that there could be a software in which you program in every single object in the world, like 3D versions of it, right? Like every animal, every machinery, every weapon, every vehicle, every kind of rock, plant, everything. And you tag them with a variety of tags. And then when you do the software, it's a series of sliders. So for example, you slide, I want a vehicle, okay, slide it, that looks real versus crazy, right? So you slide that, they go, that looks like 1950s from the United States, with a little bit of influence from insects and a texture that's very similar to rocks. So I just did the slider, turn all these on, and it goes just generate. This software probably generates something that's about 60% there, 60 or 70% there, if everything is there and you have the freedom to slide these sliders. When you have that, there's almost a little bit less need for concept artists because you could create a lot of IPs with this. Like you could generate post-apocalyptic New York that was hit by nuclear war. Now it has plant growth and everything's on a slider. So you control everything. Okay, I want overpopulation of animals in this area. I want to have a lot of dangerous people walking around. I want fires to be burning. Just turn all these things on and then press it generate. It just gives you these probably 3D scenes as well. They're not even 2D. And if you don't like it, just keep generating, tweak the little sliders and boom, 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 boom. And you're about 60, 70, 80% there for the concept pieces. You can add lighting, like this is sunset versus sunrise versus nightfall. It does everything for you. Totally doable. But I don't think anyone's going to make that software. So therefore, until someone does, you're pretty safe because concept art is too fast of a technique to give up. Okay, let's try to finish this up. You say that young artists should not promote themselves on social media. I think you misunderstood my answer there, which is no, it's not about not promoting yourself. It's about promoting yourself the right way, which is if you have portfolios, definitely put those things up. What I'm generally referring to is you're doing this for social media points versus doing it for professional getting a job points. Because sometimes I'll see young artists posting just not even good arts. It's like very, very quick speed paintings or whatever. Maybe they're having fun, but you put that out there, you're saying you're not doing this seriously. If you really want to do this for a living, go sit down with a Scott Robertson book and do a 20-hour plot drawing or do a 30-hour master study. Post that up. That's going to show a high level of interest in this business. And you'll definitely see people who are taking this business seriously doing that, but you're just doing quick speed paintings, doing things that have no skill-based, some quick stuff. Okay, do that, but just keep that maybe for yourself. You don't need to show this off to get social points or likes. Build your skills up until you start to become a professional. You don't have to show everything you do to the world because I think that's distracting when you have a goal of putting something onto Facebook or Twitter and that's your goal versus your goal is to get yourself a job and you have to go down and just do the hard stuff, right? Now, nothing wrong with putting stuff out there. What I'm basically saying is spend your time in the right places. A 20-hour plotting assignment from a Scott Robertson book will benefit you greatly versus a 30-minute random Photoshop photo bash. Okay, that's going to benefit you not much. Okay, so and the thing is, a Scott Robertson 20-hour drawing is not sexy. You post it online, nobody cares. A speed painting photo bash really quickly could actually get you some likes, but that's not going to bring you much of in terms of career things happen to you. So hopefully that resolves that question. Okay, next one is how come I don't have my own studio versus why did I start a school? Actually, I do have my studio. I have many, actually. I just don't talk about them much. Not for one to show off or talk about what I do with my businesses, but the school is one of the businesses I run. I also have a design studio that's it's been there since 2000, actually. It's almost, 16 years old, 17 years old now. That does a lot of projects for films and games. And recently, I also started a movie production studio that's also based in Singapore as well as out of China. So that is purely to produce films. And on top of that, I have some investment arms of my company that invests in a variety of random stuff. Some of it not even games or films or anything, just investing in all sorts of random things. So yes, I do a lot of things. I like to be an entrepreneur. I like doing business. I like to design. I like to do all of it. So that's why I'm also killing myself doing this kind of stuff. Very, very tired. Okay, next. We're almost done here. I think I'm going to wrap it up pretty quick because we're coming up to almost an hour and 20 minutes. Someone's wondering if they're already 21 and then can they get in. It's like, dude, you're 21. Of course you can. You're very young, actually. You don't have to worry about your age until you're probably 24, 25. That's about the average age to start getting into this business seriously. So you can still mess around for a while. Even at 21, you could just go to different schools and learn other things. You're way too young right now to worry that you're too old. Okay. Next question. How do you know if your design creative is good enough? How do you choose between different ideas? Well, that comes from experience because, yes, that is a very hard thing to do on the job. You come up with 10 different thumbnails. You have to pick one to finish. How do you know that one you choose is correct? This has to do with the experience in the business and knowing your clients, what do they need, how much risk they're willing to take, and you take a gamble. Actually, each time we do that, it is a gamble. You could choose the wrong one and the clients not like it. But over time, you start to gain a pretty good insight of what generally gets chosen versus what doesn't. So you start to take these educated guesses, I guess. All right, let's go fast as we can here. Can I do a podcast to how to improve art for beginners? Yes, maybe I'll do that for the next episode. Let's do a whole hour on that, which is beginning to end. How does someone learn how to do this on their own without any kind of school, right? Just basically self-teaching. So we'll do that. Okay. Next, what are some books that are good to learn? Mention that Scott Robertson books, man. Go get them. Design Studio Press. Next question. Cover something about project funding as well as concepts. I'm not really the right person to talk about this because I don't do Kickstarters and I don't do crowdfunding. I fund everything by myself with my own money. In terms of getting funding and talking to investors, that part I do know quite well in terms of how do you put stuff in front of investors and get them to, give you millions of dollars. That type of stuff I could talk about, but I'm not sure how interesting that is to most of you guys out there. I'm imagining most of you guys are designers and not really into the business side of things or get things funded. But we could touch upon that. If the interest level is there, I could probably do a podcast on how to get your IP in front of people. But that is a very, very hard business to be in, by the way, because IPs are generally not bought. Most of the stuff you see out there are created to be successful in the first place before they are actually bought. So getting something funded is very, very tricky. All right, let's go next one here. Another one asking about how to self-teach, so I'll leave that one alone. I think that should be pretty good. A lot of these questions actually all have to do with if you're younger, how do you teach yourself to become better? What kind of things I could do? Like I said, there was like a lot of questions with this thing. There's actually a few more left, but I think right now we're running into a lot of time here. So I'll save the rest for another episode. And maybe a few episodes from now, I'll do that. In the meantime, I'm pretty drained right now to do these questions. I think my brain's about fried. So hopefully this answered the majority of the questions. We still got about 20 more questions, 15 or so questions left. So we'll gather that up. Continue to ask questions as always. You feel free to put on YouTube comments and we'll get that stuff gathered up. So until the next episode, which I'll definitely do for a beginning artist, how to get yourself to be better. I'll do that for episode 6. And until then, have a great weekend and week ahead. Continue drawing, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. This is Feng Zhu signing out.